In 1929, inside a former sultan's palace being converted into a museum, someone found a bundle of documents nobody had bothered to open. Inside was a piece of gazelle skin parchment, drawn in ink and gold, showing coastlines that shouldn't have matched anything a mapmaker in 1513 could have known. It had been sitting there, forgotten, for over 400 years. This is Archive of the Ancients, and today we're looking at the Piri Reis map, a document at the center of one of the strangest arguments in the history of cartography. Some call it proof of an advanced lost civilization. Others call it exactly what it claims to be, a brilliant compilation stitched together from stolen charts and second-hand knowledge by a man who spent most of his life as a pirate before he became an admiral. Piri Reis began his career sailing under his uncle, Kemal Reis, as a Barbary corsair, raiding ships across the Mediterranean before the Ottoman Navy formally employed his uncle in 1495. During one of those raids, Piri Reis and his uncle captured a Spanish sailor, a man who, according to the record, had personally sailed on voyages with Christopher Columbus. That sailor is believed to have been carrying an early map of the Americas. Piri Reis kept it. That single captured document would later become the most explosive ingredient in a map most people have never heard of. By 1513, after years spent alternating between piracy and formal naval service, Piri Reis had compiled his own world map on a sheet of gazelle skin parchment roughly the size of a large tabletop. Only the western third of it survives today. What's left shows the Atlantic Ocean, the coasts of Europe and Africa, most of South America, and a strange, disputed stretch of land at the very bottom edge. The map's own legend claims an almost absurd list of sources, 20 older charts and world maps, 8 geographic treatises whose exact meaning scholars still debate, an Arabic map of India, 4 newly drawn Portuguese maps of Asia, and a map of the West Indies made by Christopher Columbus himself. Most of those source documents no longer exist anywhere else. In places, the Piri Reis map is the only surviving trace of them, which is exactly why historians treat it as a treasure rather than a curiosity. The Columbus material shows up clearest in the Caribbean, and it preserves one of Columbus's own mistakes. Columbus was so convinced Cuba was part of mainland Asia that in 1494 he had a notary go ship to ship, forcing his crew to swear under oath that Cuba was Asia, on penalty of a massive fine, and having their tongues cut out if they ever said otherwise. On the Piri Reis map, Cuba is drawn fused to a mainland coast, exactly the way a man terrified of contradicting his own admiral might draw it. Hispaniola appears strangely shaped too, its proportions echoing not the real island, but Marco Polo's centuries-old description of Sipangu, the island we now call Japan. Columbus, remember, thought he'd reached the edge of Asia. The map inherited his confusion, preserved like an insect in amber. Even small place names line up. A stretch of coast labeled Ornofe appears nowhere else in the historical record except in Columbus's own logs, and an island near Puerto Rico carries a name Columbus himself gave during his second voyage in 1494. These aren't the kind of details a mapmaker invents. They're the kind that only survive when a real physical source document gets copied by someone who never sailed those waters himself. But the real controversy sits at the bottom of the surviving fragment, a long southern coastline curling away from South America, labeled with notes about Portuguese voyages and drawn right at the edge of the known world.
For most historians, this is simply Terra Australis, a theoretical southern continent that European maps had been drawing more out of philosophical assumption than evidence since antiquity. In the 1950s, an engineer named Arlington Mallory reprojected the map using his own grid system and claimed the southern coastline matched Antarctica astonishingly well, a continent that wouldn't be officially discovered until 1820 and whose coastline wasn't seriously mapped until the 20th century. A decade later, researcher Charles Hapgood expanded the idea into a full theory, an advanced, forgotten civilization that had mapped the world, including an Antarctica free of ice, long before recorded history began. The theory spread fast, and it spread further than the evidence ever supported, picked up by writers pushing ancient astronaut theories, lost Atlantean civilizations, and pole shift catastrophes, all citing the same 1513 parchment as their proof. 2 letters written by scientists involved in a 1949 Antarctic seismic survey even expressed cautious excitement about the comparison, and those letters were enough, on their own, to keep the theory alive in popular books for decades. Here's where the theory falls apart. Ice core data shows Antarctica has been covered in ice continuously for more than 10 million years, nowhere close to the 12 or 17,000 years Hapgood's timeline required. The 1949 seismic survey Hapgood leaned on for comparison covered less than 1% of the coastline the map supposedly matched, and later researchers found no meaningful correlation between the map's southern edge and Antarctica's actual coastline, iced over or not, once the numbers were checked properly. Hapgood also had to quietly explain away inconvenient details, including relabeling an island that the map itself calls Hispaniola, insisting it was really half of Cuba, and arguing this proved Piri Reis didn't understand his own document. That's a difficult position to defend, dismissing the map's own text as an error whenever it disagrees with your theory, while treating a reprojected coastline as solid evidence. Even the map's own details argue against a southern continent reading. Its margin notes describe large snakes along that coastline, snakes that simply don't exist that far south, in Patagonia or anywhere near Antarctica. It's a small detail, but small details are usually where invented history breaks first. The far stranger true story is how the map survived at all. After Piri Reis presented it to Sultan Selim I in 1517, it simply disappeared from the historical record. Nobody knows if the Sultan ever looked at it, used it, or even unrolled it. It sat inside the private library of his predecessor, Sultan Mehmed II, for over 4 centuries, misfiled and unopened until a German theologian helping catalog the palace's collection in 1929 learned that Mehmed had been an avid patron of geography and asked staff to search specifically for old maps. What they pulled from an overlooked bundle turned out to be the only surviving piece of a Columbus map that no longer exists anywhere else on Earth. And the discovery made international headlines within weeks, eventually catching the personal attention of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, Turkey's first president, who ordered the map studied and published. So the real mystery of the Piri Reis map was never a hidden ice-free Antarctica.
It's simpler, and in some ways stranger. A pirate-turned-admiral compiled dozens of maps that mostly no longer exist, encoded a dead man's geographic mistakes into permanent ink, and produced a document so far ahead of what an ordinary sailor should have owned that people are still arguing 5 centuries later about exactly what he had access to and exactly how much he never told us. Even the map's own explanation of the word ocean hints at how differently its maker saw the world. Piri Reis derives it from a phrase meaning sound egg, folding the newly explored Americas into a much older Islamic picture of the world as an enclosed lake ringed by a distant, mysterious shore. He wasn't just copying charts. He was trying to reconcile 2 incompatible maps of reality, and the seams still show. What do you think really explains that southern coastline? An old philosophical assumption inherited from Ptolemy? A distorted Portuguese survey? Or something we still haven't identified? Let us know your theory in the comments. And if you want more stories of ancient mysteries still waiting to be solved, subscribe to Archive of the Ancients.